381 Navy SEALs trapped in a remote Afghan valley, ammo nearly gone, enemies flooding every ridge. Command back at base already began writing the loss report, because by every rule of war, this was the end. But then, against orders, against doctrine, and against every doubt thrown her way, a 26-year-old A-10 Warthog pilot climbed into her jet and made a choice. What happened next is the kind of story soldiers whisper for years. A story of defiance, skill, and courage that saved every single man from certain death. This is the untold account of Captain Delaney Thomas, the young pilot who broke every rule to bring 381 Americans home alive. At 6:30 that morning, the heat was already rising off the Kandahar flight line. Jets shimmered in the sun, crews hustled, and life on base carried on like clockwork. Captain Delaney Thomas, just 26 years old, walked the line quietly. She wasn't scheduled to fly. Again, her commander, Major Sanderson, had once told her flat out, "You're too emotional. I need steady hands. You'll stick to logistics and training flights." It burned, but she nodded and swallowed it. What he didn't know was that she had been preparing in silence for months. While others slept, she ran night simulations alone, teaching herself scenarios no one asked her to. She studied terrain maps until the valleys and ridgelines of eastern Afghanistan were etched into her memory like scars. She built her own doctrine, what to do when the rules failed, when friendlies were too close for safe air support, when lives depended on precision no textbook accounted for. By 1:47 that afternoon, alarms shattered the calm of the ops center. Drone feeds and radio bursts filled the screens. 381 Navy SEALs and attached units trapped in the Korangal Valley. Enemy fighters, nearly 800 strong, controlled the ridges above. 2 surface-to-air missile sites were confirmed. The SEALs were in a natural bowl, cut off from every side. Helicopters? No way. They'd be shot down before touching dirt. F-16s? Too dangerous. The rules forbade them from firing within 100 meters of friendlies. The SEALs were already fighting at less than 70. The room grew heavy. Options were listed. None worked. And quietly, one officer began drafting the inevitable loss of unit report. But not everyone was ready to give up. Captain Delaney spoke, "Send the A-10. Sanderson snapped back, "Denied. We're not risking an untested pilot." But the radio cut in, desperate voices from the valley. "We've got 30 minutes of ammo left." Time had ended the debate. Delaney didn't ask again. She walked out, counted 30 seconds, did the math in her head, 10 minutes to suit up, start up, and wheels up. 12 minutes to the valley, 22 minutes total. The SEALs had maybe 30. She wrote a single line on a folded letter she had carried for months. "If you're reading this, I acted because 381 Americans were dying while paperwork argued with itself." Then she strapped in. Her A-10, callsign Thunderbolt 7, was already fueled and armed. Full drum of 30mm shells, Mavericks, rockets. Her hands moved like muscle memory as she ran the checks. At 2:23 p.m., she lifted off. On the open guard frequency, her voice cut through static. "Any station, this is Thunderbolt 7, departing Kandahar inbound Korangal Valley. 381 Americans are about to be overrun, breaking rules to save them." 12 minutes later, the valley opened beneath her, exactly as she had imagined at 3 a.m. in her secret sims, 3 ridgelines, overlapping arcs of fire, and SEAL positions shrinking under the storm. Machine guns tore into their cover from the east. She rolled the Warthog, lined the reticle, and pressed the trigger. Burt! A 2-second burst of 30mm ripped the ridge apart. Dust bloomed, fire stopped. She pulled up, rolled again. Another run. Enemy fighters 70 meters from the SEALs, charging downhill. A short stitch of cannon fire cut them down mid-run. The SEAL commander on the ground, callsign Trident Actual, finally broke his silence. "Thunderbolt 7, confirmed danger close authority?" Delaney's voice was steel. "I'm authorized to save Americans. Designate targets." Back at base, Sanderson's voice roared in her headset. "Return to base immediately. You are not authorized." Delaney switched his frequency off. She wasn't here for permission anymore. She stayed only on the ground net. The only voices she wanted were the men fighting for their lives below. Trident Actual called again. "Western Ridge, 75 meters." That was suicide range for a jet, but it was home turf for an A-10. Delaney dove, lined up under a rock lip, and fired a half-second burst. Tungsten slashed a straight line between friendly strobes and enemy muzzle flashes. Silence. then cheers over the net. For the first time all day, the SEALs had hope. Delaney worked methodically, just like she'd practiced. First, kill the SAM sites. A Maverick missile streaked and blew the southern launcher apart. She dipped behind terrain, broke the second site's lock, and wiped it out on her next pass. Now helicopters could be considered. Not yet. First, she had to carve an exit corridor. She remembered a detail she'd circled on a map months ago, a shallow fold in the western ridge, invisible from satellites. She keyed the mic. Trident actual. That fold is real. Push west under my fire. Stay low. I'll walk rounds ahead of you. 30mm shells zipped across the rocks, each burst carving silence into the enemy line. The SEALs moved, first by threes, then by squads. For the first time all day, blue icons shifted on the ops center screens. An F-16 pilot watching from high above muttered in disbelief, either suicidal or surgical. So far, surgical. For 15 minutes, Delaney stayed welded to the SEALs, covering every bound, every sprint, every desperate crawl toward the fold. An RPG flashed from the ridgeline. She flared, rolled, and pulsed the cannon, erasing the shooter before the rocket cleared the tube. A truck-mounted PKM tried to reposition. 3 rounds, dead center, gone. Her Warthog was painting tungsten poetry across the valley, every burst measured, every shot a shield. Finally, the SEALs reached the extraction zone. Trident Actual's voice cracked through. Thunderbolt 7, LZ workable. Request rotors inbound. Helicopters dove in. One by one, they loaded and lifted, dust storms whipping the valley. Delaney hunted every muzzle flash, every glint, every shadow that could threaten them. She burned her last rockets. She cut her cannon bursts to half seconds. Not one enemy made it through. When the last helicopter lifted, Trident Actual spoke with formality reserved only for sacred moments. Thunderbolt 7, be advised, 381 souls accounted for. 0 friendly KIA during extraction. We owe you our lives. Delaney just replied, copy. Back at base, the runway was lined with maintainers, clerks, medics, and pilots. Not cheering, just standing in silence. Respect older than words. Sanderson was waiting. His words cut sharp. You departed without authorization, you broke every rule we wrote, and you brought home 381 Americans alive. A long pause. Then, Captain Thomas, can you teach exactly how you did it? Her answer was simple. Yes, sir. 6 months later, her name wasn't just on reprimands. It was on doctrine. She taught A-10 pilots how to see valleys not as kill boxes, but as maps. Every fold a word, every ridge a sentence, every valley a paragraph. She taught cannon discipline, half-second taps, not ego-driven streams. She taught communication, say only what moves men 10 meters closer to living. The SEALs who survived? They sent her patches, coins, notes with just 3 words, you showed up. And in the ops center, someone taped a number to the wall, 381 extracted. 0 KIA. Soldiers touched it as they walked by, not as superstition, just as respect. Captain Delaney Thomas proved something that day. That doctrine can fail, but courage guided by skill never will. When lives hung in the balance, she didn't just follow the map. She drew a new one. 381 men walked out of a tomb alive because one pilot refused to quit. If this story moved you, salute in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories of courage and sacrifice. Until next time, stay strong, stay proud, and never forget those who serve.